What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And hang on a second. Boy, we're all having audio problems here today. Welcome to our show. It is Monday, March 27th, 2017, almost into the month of April here. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I don't know how many phone calls I'm going to be able to take. But we're just going to have to deal with that. Now then, let's get over to this surveillance situation here, because I'm looking at all these articles coming on out about the surveillance on the American people, all of it a violation of the Fourth Amendment, the surveillance that was going on under the Obama administration, not just against Donald Trump, but against all kinds of leading politicians, judges, corporate CEOs. And there's William Binney, he's come on out in Tucker Carlson's show, saying they're like the Praetorian Guard. And he's saying the NSA has targeted Congress, the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump. And they're just obviously out there completely out of control with all of this stuff going on. And former CIA officer Colonel Tony Shaffer is saying this is 10 times worse than what Watergate was. Now, we're hearing that Comey and Rogers were supposed to testify before the Intelligence Committee in closed session. They have now withdrawn. They're just not going to show up. And Chuck Schumer is now out there demanding that Nunes step down as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. These are all panic reactions. These are all telegraphing the fact that they're all pulling together to hide some really horrible secret from you, the American people. Meanwhile, over on the other side, the evidence that the Russians hacked the Democratic National Committee emails is collapsing. First of all, a lot of people are saying it was an internal leak. Could have been Seth Rich, who was gunned down under strange circumstances shortly thereafter. Could have been these 4 IT workers who were inside the Congress, who were sacked for accessing computers they were not supposed to, including that of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the DNC at the time, who had access to all those emails. But no, it's Russia, 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 and they're basing this all entirely on the claims made by this group hired by the Democratic National Committee, CloudStrike. And cyber experts are saying their methodology is flawed. It's basically a self-fulfilling delusion, and it ignores the CIA's Project Umbrage, which is a program set up to carry out cyber crimes and frame third parties for them. Meanwhile, of course, the Democrats are absolutely accepting Russia's interference as on faith. We believe, don't confuse us with the facts and the evidence. We believe Russia interfered and that's an act of war. We have got to do something about that. Okay, here's your rifle, here's your parachute. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane. So a lot of chaos going on right now. There is a big, deep, dark secret. It is coming out faster than I thought it might, but it's coming on out. They're not going to be able to keep this under control because everybody watching what's going on, the defiance by the FBI and the NSA toward Congress, Schumer out there as a hatchet man trying to chop away at those people trying to conduct an honest investigation, it just screams, cover up, cover up, cover up. We live in an age of lies. Or as Mark Twain used to put it, truth has become so valuable the government is economizing it. I think we're at the point right now where the government doesn't dare tell the truth even once out of fear we might learn how to tell the difference, and that would be the end of them all. Now, getting on over to London, everybody's trying to make hay off this attack on Parliament. The British police have made yet another arrest, undermining the idea that this is some kind of a lone wolf who was inspired by ISIS. And the propaganda is already piling out on this over at the Mirrors in Great Britain. They're talking about secret text messages that ordered the lone wolf to carry out the London terror attack. And they're talking about text messages that had an image of an ISIS fighter dressed like Jihadi John, wielding a sword in front of Big Ben. Now, first of all, I have to wonder how the Mirror got into somebody's private text communications. And second, anybody who puts out a message that looks like that wants them to be found. Real terrorists are going to send out messages like, I'm having car troubles. And that's a code phrase everybody's agreed to ahead of time. When you have images that are that dramatic and that publicly damning, they're intended to be found. It's more propaganda coming on out. Now, according to a story that's over in the Daily Mail, ISIS is using the Westminster terror attack to recruit extremists with a new wave of YouTube videos glorifying the massacre. Oh, YouTube is just flooded with all these terrorist videos. I have a question about that. We keep hearing how YouTube is taking down videos for failing their community standards, for copyright violations, yet for some reason the terrorist videos are being left alone. It strikes me as a rather odd little behavior on the part of YouTube. We're going to take a second to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the London terror attacks, we're talking about Obamagate, we're talking about all this stuff is just frothing around. Now, apparently Britain, in response to the Westminster attack, is putting up barricades and deploying SAS troops to the street permanently. So there's going to be this ring of steel and all these soldiers standing around. It's going to look like the closing scenes of V for Vendetta, and none of which is going to work because it's all for show. Now, we've been talking in recent weeks about the turmoil going on in Macedonia, where there are all these uprisings and riots, all of which track back to various non-governmental organizations run by George Soros, who is pushing for globalism. And Macedonia is now shutting all of these down. They're pushing as really hard as they can to basically get rid of these agents provocateurs. And the fact that this is all about the globalists has now been underscored because apparently Brussels has approached the leader of Macedonia's opposition party, saying that as soon as they can seize power in Macedonia, they will open the negotiations to merge with the European Union. So that's what's really going on here. Now, the annual APAC conference in Washington, D.C. is starting up, and it was met with major protests by people who are sick and tired of a foreign government directing the U.S. government on how to plunder us and spend the blood of our children in foreign wars. And what was really rather amazing and very reassuring is that a lot of American Jews are in these anti-APAC protests as well. And they're basically saying that Israel's behavior represents a threat to all of the world's Jewish people. And they are absolutely right, because Israel has gone out of its way to blur Israel's political agenda with the world's Jewish people. Israel likes to claim that they exist to protect the world's Jewish people, and anytime you criticize the actions of the government of Israel, you are blaming the Israeli people, or rather the Jewish people as a whole, and the Jewish people are getting very nervous because they can see there's a backlash coming to the apartheid government, and they don't want the government of Israel setting them up as bullet stoppers, which is exactly what the government of Israel is doing. Don't hate us. We speak for the Jewish people. It's their fault. And so the American Jewish community is finally standing up. They've decided to ignore that religious prohibition about criticizing other Jews, and they're saying, this is not working. And they were out there at the forefront of that protest against AIPAC. Good for them. Now, as you know, George Soros was trying to play his little games over in Russia. Putin shut down USAID, shut down the Soros NGOs. There is still turmoil over there, and Russia arrested a group of people who were trying to basically fan up riots. And the U.S. State Department is now saying Russia needs to free these peaceful protesters. They were just peaceful protesters protesting against the corruption of Vladimir Putin. And they're not going to get anywhere with that, because we all understand these so-called peaceful protesters are hired agent provocateurs out to destabilize the Russian government and bring it down, like we've seen the U.S. do in all these other countries. Now, as you know, a lot of people have been very concerned about the continued insertion of U.S. forces on the ground in Syria. And apparently now the U.S. forces are blocking the road to Raqqa. And what it looks like they're getting ready to do is to partition Syria by military force and break off that chunk that they want to be part of the eventual Kurdistan. And obviously Russia's not on board with this. The Syrian government is absolutely opposed to it. But this is the U.S. foreign policy. We're going to take all those nations in the Middle East that might eventually pose a headache for Israel, and we're going to break them into little tiny pieces that are easy to bully and easy to push around, and Israel will be happy. And if Israel's happy, then they give us more campaign money, and we are happy. Makes it really simple. Now, as you know, starting last week, there was a building altercation where Israel flew into Syria without the permission of the Syrian government, needless to say, bombed Syrian forces to protect ISIS, and the Syrian forces fired on the Israeli planes. Syria is still saying they shot one of them down and damaged another. Israel is saying, absolutely not. It didn't happen. But you American taxpayers, you need to send us over a couple more planes right now. And Israel's attitude is, how dare you shoot at us when we bomb your country? What's wrong with you? You must all be dirty, filthy, Jew-hating anti-Semites who want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. And Russia came on in and said, Israel is no longer to violate Turkish airspace, and punctuated it with a cruise missile strike onto the very forces Israel was trying to protect. Netanyahu came on back and said, we're going to bomb any place, anywhere we want, you can't stop us, and we're not even acknowledging we got the message from Putin that we're supposed to stop. Well, now it's up again. Syria is saying if Israel violates Syrian airspace again, Syria will launch Scud missile strikes into Israel itself. And then World War III will be off and running for real. Now, on the same day that all of the world's corporate media were pouring out all their sympathy for the victims of the London terror attack, the U.S. government finally got around to admitting that they killed 200 civilians in a Mosul airstrike. They bombed a building where these people were trying to shelter from the U.S. airstrike, and they killed a whole bunch of them. But, you know, and you pay, you know, feel sorry for the people in London. The people in Mosul, you don't want to care about them. That's the message we're getting from the corporate media. U.S. is sending more troops to Mosul in the latest escalation. I wish they'd send food and generators, because right now there are 400,000 civilians trapped in Mosul with no food and no electricity, according to the United Nations. When the history of World War III is written, we already know who's going to be seen as the aggressor and the villain. Now, I'm sure the United States is convinced that they will write the future history books, just like they wrote the history books following big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2. But that doesn't work anymore in the age of the Internet. We, the people, write our own history. And we trust our own history a heck of a lot better than the packaged propaganda we get from the corporate media, the state-controlled schools, or the government itself, because it has been shown time and time again to be a passel of lies. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania not smuggling weapons to Great Britain, Pearl Harbor a surprise, Saddam's nukes, Assad's sarin gas. How many more times are you going to have to be lied to before you understand this government controls you through lies, fraud, and deception? Now, getting on back to the coming Kurdistan, which is the U.S. agenda, Kurdish forces have entered the Tapka air base west of Syria's Raqqa. Syrian forces were not present. Turkey is now digging in their heels and saying they will not participate in any military actions in either Syria or Iraq where Kurds are involved. So this is getting out of control. Meanwhile, down in Yemen, Defense Secretary James Mattis is said to be pushing for the White House to remove all restrictions placed during the waning months of the Obama administration on U.S. military support for the Saudi invasion of Yemen, including direct U.S. involvement in fighting the people of Yemen. And all the people of Yemen want is control of their own country. That's all they want. Yemen was overthrown, a puppet ruler was put in, the people of Yemen kicked the puppet ruler out, and that has led to the current situation because nobody's allowed to escape the American galactic empire. The Saudis have imposed a blockade. Famine is now a reality in Yemen, and worse things. Now, there are huge rallies all over the world now against the Saudi-led airstrikes into Yemen. Huge protest in Sana'a, one in Great Britain. And things are about to get a lot worse in terms of the public relations disaster that is being unleashed by this war. Now, back in 2015, the Pentagon made an announcement that depleted uranium munitions were not and would not be used by U.S. aircraft in the conflict against Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And it turns out that was another promise made by the U.S. that they did not keep. Because today, the Pentagon is confirming it is using depleted uranium munitions in Syria, and it's providing depleted uranium munitions to Saudi Arabia to use in Yemen. There are videos now showing the Saudi coalition using depleted uranium and chemical weapons in Yemen. Where are all these international organizations? Where's the United Nations? Where are all these so-called humanitarian activists? Oh, they're all up in London, feeling bad about the terror attack and drinking a lot of beer over there at the pubs. And we are seeing in Yemen a repeat of the tragedy that we saw in Iraq from the use of depleted uranium weapons. There's been a major increase, a surge in infant deformities caused by the depleted uranium. We saw the same thing in Iraq. We saw the same thing up in Afghanistan. And here's where it gets really cruel. It isn't just the people who are being hit by these munitions who are suffering this. U.S. veterans exposed to these weapons come home, start families. There's an epidemic of severe birth defects among our veterans. What a horrible thing to do to those who serve the nation, who put on that uniform. And that's something else they're trying to keep quiet, even from other military. You remember how the government reacted with Gulf War syndrome? Oh, you're imagining it. It's nothing. It's just you. There's nothing. Don't talk to any other military. If you mention this to anybody, we're going to cut off the support payments. Now, the U.S. justifies the use of depleted uranium because it's armor-piercing. Unfortunately, where they're using it isn't armored. They're using it against these civilian locations with brick and wood, and they don't need depleted uranium. It's just a way of taking our radioactive waste problem and making it somebody else's radioactive waste problem. And it's big business, because right now the U.S. is selling depleted uranium munitions to Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Turkey, the United Kingdom, Australia, Egypt, Israel, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan that we know of. Now, have you ever been to the zoo and see the monkeys flinging their poo? It's a common behavior in apes, and we see it in humans, like when the Israeli settlements intentionally dump their raw sewage onto neighboring Palestinian farmlands. Well, depleted uranium is just the high-tech version of this same monkey behavior. We're going to fling our radioactive poo onto you as an expression of our dislike. And that's exactly what it is. And the problem with depleted uranium, it is the gift that keeps on giving. Those people will be suffering the effects of this for generation after generation after generation, because depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion, with a B, years. The U.S. is turning large sections of the planet into areas of radioactive wasteland with this policy. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to talk about the economic news now, and triggered in part by Janet Yellen's raising of the rate recently. We're seeing the dollar go into a decline, as was expected. Everybody was saying, why raise the rates now when all the indicators were saying not to? Well, because it's a political turf war. Who cares about the economy? We just have to get Trump. And what we're seeing between Yellen and all of this infighting in Congress is a totally dysfunctional government. They are so absorbed with preserving their own self-interest, with scoring points, with sneering at each other. They can't operate as a government anymore. They can't function. If somebody were to attack the United States right now, they'd just walk on in, because our government is incapable of functioning as a government any longer. Now, getting back to Yellen and her rate increase, the dollar collapse is continuing, and right now, over 80% of all the post-Trump gains have now vanished. The trend is not my friend. It's heading on down. An even more alarming article came out of Zero Hedge, expressing concern that right now the yield curve is flatter than before the election, rates are collapsing, reform was the last hope for the bank bulls, but nobody's talking reform. Nobody's allowing reform. They like the system just the way it is because it sucks money out of your pocket and puts it in their pockets, and they don't want that to change one bit, even if it means the entire system crashing down at some point in the near future. Because they're money junkies, and like any other addict, they can't see anything beyond their immediate addiction. Now we're looking at growing problems with the subprime auto loans. You thought they would have learned their lesson with the subprime mortgages back in 2008, but no, of course not. Why? Because they didn't feel the pain. You did. When the banks ginned up that mortgage-backed security fraud and made a huge amount of money, and then the fraud collapsed, who got to pay for it? You did. With TARP and bailouts, QE, QE2, QE3, QE4, QE12, QE11, because in fascism, those who make money are allowed to keep it, and those who lose money are allowed to drop that onto the ordinary population, and that is where we are right now. So, having learned nothing from subprime home loans, they've been trying to buoy up the auto market with subprime auto loans. And they're now becoming a problem. That's a bubble that's about to be burst. There's only one way to have a working, healthy economy, and that is that the wealth has to be recycled from the top back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries so that workers can trade their labor for those wages and salaries and then pump that money back into the economy through the shopping malls, through the car dealerships, through the restaurants, through the movie theaters. That's what keeps an economy healthy and moving along. Under fascism, that recycling mechanism is taken out. And all the money is up there at the very top. And nobody has any cash left down here. And that's why everybody is hurting. And instead of correcting that imbalance, correcting the wealth inequality, they're out there offering more loans and subprime loans and more credit and more debt. That's their solution to everything. Okay. Right now, subprime auto loans are crushed worse than in 2009. And last week when Claire and I had our car stolen and then returned, thankfully, we did obviously take a look at car prices around us, and they're amazing. If people actually had money, they would be buying stuff right now. The deals are amazing. We were down at the shopping mall the other day, 50% off of everything. This is inside one of those iconic retailers that's about to go belly up, 50% off of everything. Everybody had their hands in the pocket. All the sales and all the discounts and all the lead-ons and everything are not going to work if the people are not allowed to have enough money to actually buy those goods. That's just common sense, which seems to be absent inside the Beltway. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's take a couple of phone calls here. Nathan in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Michael?
I hear you fine.
Okay. Yippee skippy. I'm on YouTube right now, and I'm looking at a video. London terrorist drives across Westminster Bridge on path of destruction. So I I've got the thing on full screen, and unfortunately, I loaned my electron microscope to my neighbor and broke it. So I got to go to court to get him on a payment plan. So I've got a 4-inch magnifying glass, and I've got the car stopped halfway across the bridge. And I'm looking at the, people that are, about ready to die or get seriously injured. I don't see anybody, on the bridge. I see one person. And there's a couple of spots where people are disappearing before the car gets there. And then this other video shows the woman jumping off the bridge and the splash occurring before she hits the water.
Well, could you send me the URL for that video?
Huh?
Can you send me the URL for that video? And I'll take a look.
Yeah, take a look at it. And, there's all kinds of mistakes with this event. There's a picture of 2 knives by the supposed killer, and there's no blood on the knives, and, lots and lots of other things. And I won't argue about was it real or was it a hoax, but I see a lot of flaws in carrying this stuff.
Well, like I said, you need to send it so I can take a look at it myself. I did see one picture of one of the knives, rather wicked-looking knife, that did have blood on it. The idea of whether it's faked or not, I don't want to go in there right now. Was it staged? That is certainly an open question because it certainly gave the media an opportunity to not have to look at the revelations about the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign, and I think that may have had a lot to do with it. Anyway, Nathan, send me that information. We got to let you go. The phone lines are loading up here, and we're going to switch over to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I got the same issue I had about 2 weeks ago. Unable to stream RBN, can't get to the website, can't even call on my landline to the network to be on the call line. And it's my internet service provider is AT&T, and I don't know if anybody else has called this problem into you. I just want to know what's going on here. I can't figure out what's going on.
Okay, can you email me your IP address? You may have gotten caught in the automatic security system because it's a little sensitive because it's trying to head off the major attacks. Email me your IP, and I'll check to make sure that you're not blocked at my server, okay? As far as RBN, I have no idea what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't either. Hey, just to let you know, there's 7 more days on Radio Shack before they close their doors, so if you're looking for some good deals, you have 7 days left.
Well, Radio Shack doesn't have anything that I want to buy anymore. They stopped doing that years ago, and the Radio Shacks that were near to where I live are already gone. So at this point, I mean, any of these stores going out of business, you're going to find some great deals. Sears is getting ready to close their doors. We're going to find good deals down there. Anyway, Steve, email me your IP. I'll make sure that you're not in the filter, and we're going to switch over to Nick in Southern California. Aloha, Nick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling to talk about the economy. Specifically, I wanted to talk about gold price. Right now, obviously, they're manipulating gold and silver. We talked about that with paper contracts.
Name one thing they're not manipulating.
My brain.
Very good.
Hopefully. So now, an interesting exercise would be to go ahead, give one of the major, gold and silver dealers a call, and tell them that you have $100 million that you want to invest, and see what the premium is on a large purchase of gold, and you will find that it's like 85% of the price, as opposed to a much smaller percentage at the smaller amounts.
That seems counterintuitive because one would think the majority of the uplift, the straddle, would be on the small purchases, 1 or 2 coins and so forth. And I would not advise anybody to call up a broker and claim to have any vast sum of money to invest, because that could be construed as fraud.
Well, yeah, I certainly wouldn't take it any farther than that, but the idea would be that that's, I've got a couple of people I spoke with, and they're saying that basically what they're doing is that would be a little bit closer to the real price of gold right now as it's physically valued. to let the smaller people make smaller purchases. It's not really going to destabilize, letting the populace at large have small amounts of physical, because that's not really going to change things in their manipulation. But to have somebody with a lot of money to go in and purchase, they're actually going to raise the premiums because they want to keep everybody essentially unprotected. And that's one thing. I also sent you an email over the weekend with regard to the Samsung. They had the WikiLeaks dump of the targeted, the targeted manufacturers of products, Samsung, iPhone, things like that, and Siemens was on the list. I don't know if you knew that already.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if that was kind of more evidence towards perhaps the malware that's put on these Siemens, the Stuxnet, and all these types of things could have actually made Siemens complicit in the whole deal. Do you think that's a stretch, or is that something to consider?
It's hard to say, because certainly the manufacturers are denying that they're involved with pre-installing spyware on their devices, but we know through the long history of the NSA, they tend to compromise these companies. As you know, at the end of World War II, Great Britain and the United States made presents of captured German Enigma machines to friendly governments around the world without telling them that Bletchley Park was now able to decode the messages that were on those machines. Well, as Enigma went out of fashion, there was a company in Europe called Crypto AG that initially came out with an updated mechanical Enigma machine and then eventually an electronic system, and there was a big stink. This was reported in the book The Puzzle Palace, where the NSA went into the owner of Crypto AG and just gave him a huge amount of money to allow a back door to be built into the system. And in the age of mechanical and now computer encryption, absent back doors, the NSA can't actually decode and break messages. We proved that with our NSA challenge. And that's why they're always trying to get everybody to use a government-approved encryption, whether it's DES, which was intentionally weakened, Clipper chip, which had your encryption key embedded in the message for their convenience. And, anything that you buy off the web or buy off the shelf at your computer store for encryption, I guarantee you it's backdoored. If you need to protect your communications, if you want to make sure NSA isn't grabbing pictures of your boyfriend or girlfriend to amuse themselves with, if you don't want them stealing your business secrets to give to their cronies like happened at the Seattle APEC, you have got to invest the time and trouble to create your own systems of encryption. And that was the whole point of my Rivero Challenges the NSA article, to show how easy it is to actually do with just a little bit of programming.
Perfect, Mike. Well, before you let me go here, I think that one thing that might help everybody understand things, I mean, nationwide, but even our listeners, would be if you were to take a few moments and kind of do the Mike Rivero condensed for the public explanation of the bond market, because I don't think people really understand what it means when China is dumping their treasuries, our treasuries, I should say. I don't think they understand when another country starts dumping our treasuries and buying the shorter yields. I think even to somebody like myself, until I looked into it, and I have an economics background, and even to me that was a little confusing. So if you did take a few minutes there, I think if everybody understood economics, there would be no such thing as socialism.
Well, I agree with you on that latter part. The bond market encompasses a lot more than just the U.S. Treasuries, but to narrow our context a little bit, basically the way they conceal the fact that the Federal Reserve is just a legalized counterfeiting outfit is for every bunch of money the Federal Reserve creates, there is a corresponding Treasury bond. Now, the Treasury bond is a promise by the U.S. government that somewhere down the road they will take money away from the American people without giving anything back for that money and give it to whoever is holding that bond, which is foreign governments, foreign banks, the Federal Reserve itself. What happens when they're taking your money and giving nothing back for it? Well, it's called slavery. The problem is that during the recent years, especially since 2008, the Treasury has been overprinting Treasury bonds the same way that the Federal Reserve has been overcreating currency. And they stopped reporting on that M3 aggregate years and years ago to try and conceal the true scale of inflation. And so most investors around the world are now understanding there is a Treasury bond bubble. The U.S. Treasury has issued more Treasury bonds than can ever actually be redeemed by the American people. There are not enough American taxpayers to make good on all those Treasury bonds, especially in an era of depressed wages and salaries. Even with all the illegal immigrants, if they were legalized and turned into workers, there are no jobs for them. So if you have massive unemployment and wages and salaries are in the basement, the government can't make good on those Treasury bonds, and that's why so many people are now dumping them as failed investments. And what the Federal Reserve is doing in a lot of cases is, again, they're creating new money out of thin air to buy up all those Treasury bonds. But it's all worthless paper, and they're just shuffling it back and forth in the hope that you won't figure out what's going on.
I wonder why Russia is buying them up and China's dumping them. That's an interesting question.
That would be an interesting question, but what Russia may be looking at is trying to use the possession of those treasuries to regain some leverage against the obvious U.S. agenda to start a new Cold War.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate everything, and I hope that my package I sent you arrives soon.
Oh, was that the one with the book in it?
Yes, sir.
That arrived just today. Quite fascinating, and thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a quick read, and you know, I'm very, very close to the author. Hopefully you have the time and the interest to read it.
Well, I've already read part of it. Please tell the author I love the book, and tell the artist I love the illustrations.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. All right, we're going to get back to the news now. Along with the subprime auto loan bubble, there is another bubble building around Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that Wall Street has gone back to their old tried and true method of creating instant wealth through the inflation of real estate prices. Because if they can run up the price of the building, then there's a gap between its appraised worth and the amount owed on its mortgage, and in that gap lies the equity, which can be siphoned off for more loans or more purposes. But it's all cute bookkeeping, because when that overinflated price of the real estate collapses, like it did in 2008, then all of the loans taken out on that equity can come due, because the securitization isn't there anymore. And now Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are still dealing with the aftermath of the 2008 crash, have created another bubble, this time in the multifamily rental market. And as long as the Wall Street boys can play their games and nothing bad happens to them, and all of the damage they cause is transferred on to you, the American people, they're going to keep on doing what they're doing, because they're getting rich. They're getting insanely, insanely rich while driving you into poverty. And that's something you need to keep in mind. Well, apparently Donald Trump, despite Yellen's raising of the rate, is going full Keynesian, priming the pump. He's going to run up the U.S. government debt. To be very honest, from his point of view, he doesn't have any other options. In order to do anything, whether it's infrastructure improvement, building the wall, whatever, he's got to get some capital to work with. And his budget cuts are not going to cover it. Again, I think Donald Trump would be well advised to talk to Ellen Brown, who has pointed out that if Trump were to use his authority as president to issue a new U.S. government currency to fund the infrastructure projects, instead of borrowing that currency from the Federal Reserve at interest, it would cut the eventual cost of the infrastructure improvements in half. Now, Russia appears to be getting ready not only for a collapse of the U.S. dollar, but more sanctions. They're starting to set up an alternative SWIFT system. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, SWIFT is the global electronic interbank system. When you send money from one bank to another anywhere in the world, it goes through SWIFT. And that makes all of these countries and all of these banks dependent on SWIFT, and it is often used in a punitive manner. North Korea was just disconnected from the SWIFT system to cut it off from global banking. And Russia is apparently concerned that the U.S. may try that tactic on them. So they are getting ready to create an alternative, just like they've created an alternative to the Western-centric private central banks with BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperative Association, all these various other groups, the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank. They're setting up parallel systems to challenge the supremacy of the private central bankers. And that really is a big part of what these wars are about. The so-called clash of civilizations is actually a war between banking systems, between banks that serve the bankers versus banks that serve the people in the nation. Obviously, I want the latter one to win out. So let's talk about immigration and refugees. Pope Francis is now out there. He's a globalist. And he's out there wagging his finger, saying that the other countries in the EU should not leave the way Britain did. You're all going to go to the dark regions. The devils are going to get you. Don't you dare do it. And it raises the issue of how compromised Pope Francis is and whether he was installed as Pope and Pope Benny the Rat was forced out because Benny the Rat didn't want to go along with the globalist agenda. But the Pope is using the Catholic Church to push for the one world order. He's probably assuming there'll be one global religion as well. Catholicism, of course. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in Chateau Elan, Georgia, actually it's the name of a company, and what they did is they went ahead and fired all their illegal immigrant workers, and they are now hiring American workers to replace the fired illegal immigrants. And contrary to the propaganda from the pro-immigration people, yes, there was a huge crowd of people who showed up for these jobs. Because every time you talk about illegal immigrants displacing legal American workers, the first thing you hear is, oh, the illegal immigrants are taking jobs Americans don't want to do. That's the propaganda. And as this illustrates, yeah, there are Americans who want jobs. We have 90 million legal American citizens and legal resident citizens who are willing and able to work, who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. Don't tell me they're going to turn down the opportunity for some kind of employment. Most of these people have exhausted any kind of social support. They've gone off the end of the food stamps or the unemployment. They're just barely getting by. And so, yeah, when a company fired all their illegal immigrant workers, there were plenty of Americans ready to take those jobs. Now, apparently, German Chancellor Angela Merkel last week visited the eastern city of Halle to visit the National Academy of Science. She was met with a crowd of German protesters shouting, "Heil Merkel, Heil Merkel, Heil Merkel." Merkel is in serious, serious trouble. There is no way she can win the election for another term as chancellor. She might try and steal it. Probably is already offering Hillary Clinton's consultants lots of bucks to come on over and smooth her path back to another term in office. But it's very obvious the German people have just had it with all of this open border nonsense. The German government has again reiterated and expanded its order to the German media to not ever mention the ethnicity or origin or religion of anybody who's been arrested for rape or burglary or robbery or any other violent crime. The German government is trying to cover this problem up. Okay. I don't know if that's coming from my end or somebody else's end. Alrighty. Got a bad connector somewhere. Alrighty. I'll look at it over the station break. Now, over at the French elections, Hollande is rejecting the claim that he orchestrated media leaks to derail Fillon's campaign. And it's going back and forth. And what this is an attempt to distract the French people from the substance of the accusations against Fillon, which is that he gave his wife a fictitious job as a parliamentary aide. She got a huge salary and didn't have to do anything for it. And he did do that. That's now beyond question. And so Fillon is now out there saying, well, Hollande put this out there, how dare he? In an attempt to distract the French people from what is going on over there. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. I'm going to try and find where the noise is coming from, and we'll be right back.